Welcome everybody to this episode of The Chart where we go over all things personal finance. In today's episode, we are discussing car loans, car payments, all things kind of buying a car and what you need to know uh, when approaching these investment or financial vehicles. Pun. Okay. With me always, I'm your host, John Alordi, and with me always is Jeff Myers.
Hey, John, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm excited to talk cars. So,
I love cars, so
yeah, you're
I'm
a car
excited
guy.
about this too.
Yeah. So we can get into it. I think you and we have very different opinions on car loans and cars. So it'd be good to get that compare and contrast about it. But let's just,
Yeah.
again, start with the basics. What is a car loan?
So similar to what we've talked about in the past, right? We're taking a loan from an institution in order to purchase a car. So same kind of similar to the mortgage. The car is used as collateral. So that's kind of the asset that the bank is going to use in order to lend you money. So you go out and buy a car, they're going to lend you money, usually going to be a slightly favorable rate because you have an asset backing it up, but going to be higher than a mortgage, even though you're borrowing less money. So again, another form of borrowing money to fund a purchase.
Right. So yeah, continuing with our series on debt. So it seems to be pretty standard debt like anything else. But let's go a little bit deeper. And where would you get a car loan? Because I think that to me, when I think car loans, that's what kind of makes it different from a lot of other loans. Is that
Yeah.
it's coming from an interesting spot. So
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty unique question because standard, you can get a car loan from a bank,
mhm,
but most of the time, actually, car manufacturers, car companies, Toyota, Honda, they have a financing arm
mhm,
associated with their company. So you can go to any car dealership down the street from you, and they can provide you financing to buy that car. So it's kind of weird. You could go to, the Nissan store, the Honda store. You could go to places like CarMax, even used financing, kind of used credit. Random pop-up shops can often provide you financing as well. So it's kind of an interesting section of the market, I guess is a way to put it, because just about any place you go can help you finance a car loan.
right. It just seems like it's easily available in a lot of ways,
Yep.
almost like a credit card. But it's
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that it's a new trend, but it's especially prevalent with cars where it's like the producer of the product is also the financer. Oftentimes, the construction worker or the contractor isn't necessarily the person giving out the home loan. However, like I used to work for General Motors. I can tell
Hmm.
you right now, I think most of General Motors, most of their revenue comes from the financial wing. They make
Yep.
money from giving people car loans, not necessarily from making cars. Obviously, they go hand in hand, but it's interest. They make a lot of their money off interest.
Yeah. So I know a guy that owns a couple car dealerships,
Hmm.
and I've talked to him in the past where car dealership does great, like in general, selling cars, making money, but his profit generation machine is the financing side of it. Like they give out car loans to anyone and everyone, and they make a ton of money off of that.
Right. So I think something our society should be aware of is that the car dealership or these auto companies, they're more financial institutions than actual
Yep.
manufacturing companies, at least as a consumer.
Yeah, and that's absolutely something to be careful of because if you think about it in that way, you realize that they want you to take a longer car loan. They want you to buy a more expensive car. They want you to put less down
Right.
because they don't care about the car, they care about the financing. That's where they're making their money. And you generally don't know that. It's not super common knowledge to the general public.
Right. And I think it also changes the incentive a little bit because if you look at like a normal store, and to be fair, some stores do this as well. Like
Yeah,
Macy's will offer a credit card,
right.
but most places like retail places are just looking to move product,
Right.
right? They're looking to make sales and they make money off of every sale. With a car dealership, it seems like they want to move product, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, but they want to move product with the right financial instruments attached to it so they can really, really make their money.
Yeah, and actually, we can dive into this shortly on like the car buying process. But I have done both, manufacturer financed and bank financed,
Hmm.
and I think that they actually, if you buy from a dealership, they push you down the list in terms of getting you out the door if you're not financing with them. Like my biggest pet peeve of going to a car dealership, buying from a car dealership, is just the fact that you're often waiting there for hours to
Oh
get
wow.
processed. And
Okay.
it drives me absolutely bananas. Even if I come in with my own financing settled and everything,
Sure.
you still have to wait forever to get it done. But we'll
That's
dive
fine.
into that in a minute.
Sure. So yeah, before we get into the car buying process, let's just kind of hit it with the question we've been asking all of these debt uh, types, and that is this considered good debt?
Yeah, so I think this probably falls a little bit closer into the realm of credit cards where we don't think it's good debt.
Right.
But there's a lot of asterisks, caveats to that, of course. And we can dive into this a little bit deeper, but a car loan, if you need a car and the only way you can get a car is through a car loan, then sure, it can be good. If
Yeah.
it's something that's not going to break the bank, not going to destroy your budget, it's definitely helpful. And can be a good source of funding. But is it really ideal? No. Can you get a car without a loan? Yes. Should you probably get a car without a loan? Most of the time, yes.
Right.
Um, but it also depends on how you view the car. And I know that we have different views on this. Whether the car is, um, a piece of material product that gets you from A to B, or if it's something that you view as a status symbol, or you love cars, or you really want this specific type of car. That's going to be kind of pros and cons that you have to weigh in that situation.
Yeah, well, let's dig into that now because I do think a lot of people consider this bad debt. And the main reason I think people consider it bad debt is that unlike a house, which theoretically should go up in value over time, or at least it's expected to,
Right.
we know cars decrease in value and decrease in value quickly. So can you
Right.
kind of explain that phenomena of depreciation with the car and kind of what does it look like when you like how does the price of a car change from new to 10 to 20 years old?
Yeah, it's wild if you go. There's so many pieces to this. So let's just look at a brand new car. I mean, the general knowledge associated with this is you buy a brand new car, the second you drive it off the lot, it depreciates by 30%. And so if you think about it in that way, you're underwater on that loan the moment you drive off the lot with your car, because $30,000 car, you drive off and it's now worth what,
21?
$21, and
Yeah.
your loan is for $30,000 or whatever it is. You immediately have to work off that negative equity
Right.
really, really quickly to be able to be positive. So what that means is if you try to sell it, you're going to owe more on your loan than you'll be able to sell it for.
Right.
And if you go out and look at a used car that's even 2 years old, the price difference in those is amazing. And 2-year-old car is not a bad car. You could save a lot of money on that front.
Right.
So it's really something to be aware of, that unless you have some sort of fancy specific car that's going to be worth a lot down the road, you're going to lose money buying a brand new car.
Right. I think that's such a I mean, we've all heard that phrase, like as soon as you take it off the lot, it loses value. But I think putting it in concrete terms of if it's a $30,000 car, as soon as you park it in your home, you've lost $9,000 worth of equity. It's just gone.
Yeah.
And I so uh, time to reveal my personal preference. I've never bought a new car in my life. I've never bought a car from a dealer in my life. I'm one of those Craigslist I buy a car off Craigslist. I buy used cars, maybe off like a Facebook Marketplace. I've looked. Uh,
Wow.
I would never get a car payment in the world. I just it's my dad drilled that into me. That's his fault. But so a lot of this for me is I just don't know that world that well. So can you kind of go into what is the car buying process like?
Yeah.
Just for my own knowledge, because I don't actually like I've never stepped foot on a dealership. I wouldn't dream of it. My dad will find me and hunt me down. So like what yeah, let's kind of go through that process and like things to avoid. What are some things you've noticed? Like
Yeah.
how if you were to go down this route, which I don't think you should, but I'm the vast minority of people that thinks that. So let's like how would you approach it? How do you approach it? Being the financial expert that you are.
So I've bought used and brand new cars in my time. So I've had experience with both, and I've bought from dealerships and from places like CarMax,
Okay.
which is, they're not a dealership. They're just like a used car kind of a go-between, honestly.
Right.
But anyways, the point is, it's a harrowing process. I don't like car buying at all, and
Hmm.
I love cars. I mentioned this earlier to you. I love the Mustang. I've always been a huge fan since I was a little boy of being obsessed with a Mustang. Um, but the idea of going to a dealership and buying that car is just like it's enough to make me not do it because I don't want to deal with that. So the general way that it works, car buying from a dealership,
Hmm.
we'll just kind of do real high level, is you're going to go in, you either know the car that you want or you don't know the car that you want. And you work with a salesman who's going to have you test drive a few and then kind of push you in the direction of buying one. And then you can either use their financing department or come with your own and go through that process. My experience, it is a 4 to 7 hour process to go from the moment you step in the door to when you actually leave with your car. And I've done that process between the hours of 6 and midnight, and I've done the process between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. And it's like they're both terrible, and you can never get out of there quickly, and I really don't like it. Um, the biggest thing for me is realizing that there are places like CarMax where, and we'll have to get into this too, you can't, there's no price negotiating. So the
Right.
price that they give you is the price that it is no matter what. And they don't get paid commission based on the value of the car. They get paid commission on when they sell a car. So that's a big difference of CarMax is so they're going to try to help you find a car as
Hmm.
opposed to a dealership. Those salesmen are going to get paid more if you buy a more expensive car.
Right.
So let's say you go into a car dealership and you want to test drive a Toyota 4Runner, right?
Hmm.
Those are pretty expensive cars. They start at
Yeah.
like $30,000.
Oh yeah.
Um, well, so full disclosure, Katie and I just bought a car a couple weeks ago.
What kind?
um, we got
Is it a
a
Forerunner?
Nissan Pathfinder,
Okay.
but we wanted a Toyota 4Runner,
Who
and
doesn't? It's a great
they're
looking
so
car.
cool. Yeah.
Anyways, that's
Um, but
yeah.
so the point of that is, I have a new daughter. We wanted a bigger car to be able to cart her around
Hmm.
effectively because we had a small car that was paid off, but it just didn't work well with a car seat. So we'd gone to look at Forerunners, and we went in the door and we said, hey, we want to test drive a Forerunner. In our minds, what we want to drive is the base model, the cheapest one. What
Right.
he brings us to test drive is the off-road version, which is like 3 or 4 steps up, not the top
Yeah.
of the line, but like
No.
middle to top. And it's extra nice. I mean,
Oh, I
leather
bet.
seats, it's lifted, it's got bigger wheels, it's got tinted windows, all the cool stuff. You drive around in it, you're like, this is cool. But
Yeah.
that's what these salesmen want to do. They want you to test drive the nicer one before the base one so that you can feel the difference and then kind of get emotionally involved in that.
Hmm.
And then they want to push you further up the line until you buy a nicer car. So that's what I find frustrating about buying from a car dealership. And you always have to wait around because every salesman is working 3, 4, 5, 6 people at once.
Right.
Instead of being focused on you for the whole time you're there and getting you out the door, they want to work on 3 or 4 at once so they can get paid more because that's how they get paid.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, it's definitely a frustrating and time consuming process um, that I'm just not a huge fan of.
Sure. So let's we know it's a rough process. Let's talk about like how to approach it then. We
Yep.
talked about like new car not worth really doing. So that means you're looking at a used car.
Yep.
So what generally like what are your kind of like your rules of thumb, your heuristics when you approach your way to buy a car? And then I'll give my approach on how I've done it in the past,
Yeah.
which is unique but effective.
I mean, just like anything else that you're going to buy that's expensive is doing research,
Hmm.
knowing what kind of car you want. I'm not going to dive into the specifics of like understanding the car or
Right.
Carfax or anything like that. But from a financial side, I think really evaluating what it looks like to have that car payment on your budget and how you can effectively plan for that is extremely important. Just
Hmm.
like just like we talked about with mortgages, the banks, the car institutions are going to approve you for more than you really should have
Right.
on your books. So figuring out, what is a good budgeted amount you can start at, hey, we think we can afford $300 a month. for a car payment. What does that mean we can afford for a car? And
Right.
so kind of like backing into the car value in that way, I think is an effective approach. On that front, you also have to be careful of, because car loans used to be a 4-year, sometimes 5-year kind of thing. But as cars have expanded in price and popularity over the last few years, they've now expanded it to you can take a car loan that's even 7 years, sometimes 8 years, which is extremely long time to have a loan on a car that's depreciating in value every single year. So it's really important to kind of plan on that front. So
Mhm.
you want to be aware of what you would pay, how much you can afford a month. And in my opinion, I think it's better to go the bank route for
Okay.
getting a car loan, because you can get approved for a loan without someone trying to sell you for a higher loan amount.
That's a
If
good
you
point.
do it online, you're going to get approved. They're going to tell you, you're approved for this amount of money, and then you can kind of use that to say, okay, I'm going to get a car under that amount. And
Right.
then you go into the car dealership and say, all right, I know that I want this type of car. I don't want to spend more than this amount of money. Show me what you have on that front.
Right.
And then you can kind of go through that process together.
Kind of gives you a nice little constraint too, so you don't get talked into sales, fall for their tricks and
Right.
end up spending more than you wanted to.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's kind of a nice little rule to go into a rough situation with.
Yeah.
So I can go about my process now, which is I've only ever bought used cars, all off Craigslist. But now that Craigslist is kind of iffy, I would do it off of like a Facebook Marketplace or somewhere else. And I've had great success. I go through cars a little bit quicker. I think that, well, maybe not than the average person, because they are used cars. They don't quite last as long, right? They're usually 5 to 10 years old when I get them. I tend to get new cars every. It's actually got kind of weird now because I used to live in New York City, didn't have a car, but every about 4 or 5 years I get a new car, which I don't know. Is that common for most people? I don't know.
I think it's becoming more common now. Yeah.
Okay. But that's just because with a used car, you're driving a car at the end of its life, right? It's like a rescue dog. You only get it at the end of its life.
Right.
But it's broken and it's nice sometimes. So
I
with
hope that doesn't apply to dogs.
eh, the metaphor falls apart. Anyways, so what I always did is with buying a used car, it's straight cash, right? There's no financing. It's nice in that it's now your car, you own it. And because you're catching it at the end of that depreciation, right? Because the car depreciation starts off really fast, and then the older it gets, the less value it loses, right?
Right.
So uh, you don't lose as much value. You kind of keep your equity a little bit longer, right? And so what I always did is that you always look for the specific car brands. We all know them: Toyota, Honda. They're Lexus, which is just a Toyota, and then what's the fancy Honda brand?
Acura.
Acura. Thank you. So all of those are the cars that generally last a long time. You want to avoid American made, unless it's Buick, which is a good American made brand. You can look it up. The Buicks of like the late '90s are still around. You'll still see them on the roads today, like an old Buick LeSabre, or what's that other one? Anyways, that's what I drive now. I drive a Buick, and generally, what you can do is, what you have to do is research, right? Because you're not getting a new car, you need to find the right car, and that requires time and requires patience. So a lot of Craigslist will have terrible cars, like it'll be like GMC Suburban, 250,000 miles on it, $5,000. Don't get that car. Okay, you're gonna want the Suburban. Don't get that Suburban, uh, because a lot of these cars just are ground to dust, and not even a dealer will take them back.
Right.
However, there are people out there that have great cars, and so it just takes time. If you're in a pinch, it's probably not the way to go about it, but what your patience will pay off, right? So I
Mhm.
got my Buick. It was an '07. I bought it in 2016, I want to say. So it was 9 years old at the time, right? Yeah, 9 years old. It had 40,000 miles on it. Uh,
What?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was great. Like they're out there, and I paid $5,000 for the car. I don't go off of Kelley Blue Book. I think that's a scam. I don't really know what's up with it. There's money being exchanged with that. So I just go with like what's a good deal relative to other cars in the area. And I highly recommend, with that, I guess with the older model, and I was just say I highly recommend aim for luxury cars or semi-luxury cars. They age better, and oftentimes they come with more features than even like a brand new base car. Like
Yep.
my Buick came with heated seats, heated steering wheel, all sorts of great stuff, and which was top of the line in '07, which in 2016 was a little more standard, right? But
Right.
that's kind of how you make up that difference. So it was great. It's always fun to like walk around with a couple $1,000s in cash and make the transaction. It's always worked for me, but just make sure you do your research, do the Carfax yourself. It's I think $30, $40. Investigate the car, find the car you want, talk to the person selling it to get a good understanding of the story, do the Carfax, and then test drive it, meet the person, check to make sure the engine is clean but not too clean, right? Because if it's too clean, that means that they're scamming you because there's an issue with it. And then you can also take it to a mechanic, and they'll be happy to do a quick, however many point inspection on it to take a look at it. And it's a longer. Car dealership is also a long process, but it seems like you're just kind of sitting around. This one's a long process too, but in the end, you avoid interest payments, you avoid
Hmm.
losing a lot of equity, and if you do it right, you can get a quality car that'll last you a while. Because they are older, you'll have to do some fixes here and there, right? Like might have to
Right.
replace the belts and some of the kind of more rubbers that kind of break down over time. But
But
I've
if
had no problems with it.
you're paying for it up front, you're not paying monthly out of it. You can have that amount saved for future repairs and kind of plan for that a little bit more
Exactly.
effectively.
That's kind of the uh, that's kind of the trade-off, right? Is that you
Yep.
don't have that interest. You pay for repairs or upgrades. A lot of times
Hmm.
that's a thing you can do. Like I like to put a nice sound system in all my cars, so I'll pay to get a great, custom sound kit put in there. So it kind of frees you up to do some things. I prefer it. You don't lose that much money out of it, is my
Yeah.
experience.
So I think one rule of thumb, I think that's probably a good thing to remember when looking at cars like that in general is 10,000 to 15,000 miles a year is pretty standard. If you
Yes.
get a car that's like wherever you are in its life has less than that miles, it's generally going to be pretty well kept car because it's not driven as much. So your example of buying a 9-year-old car that only had 40,000 miles on it,
Yeah.
you should assume that that car should have had 90,000 miles on it.
Exactly.
And so you got that for 5K at 40,000 miles is a great deal.
Yeah.
That should have a lot of life, even more life than something that has 80,000 miles on a 9-year-old car.
Right. I think that's a great way to put it. Is that like for every year you assume 10, I assume 10,000 miles. So anything
Yeah.
below that, you're getting extra life out of the car.
Yep. Yep.
So that's a
So
great.
actually, that brings up a good point because we're talking now about car loans. We've talked about buying a car outright from Craigslist, something like that. What about leasing a car? We didn't
Oh, we
even
didn't talk
jump
about
into
leasing a
that.
car. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
looked at leasing a car because I thought, because I'm a fan of renting an apartment, right?
Yep.
Because your landlord takes care of a lot of things for you, so it makes life simpler. Same should theoretically apply to a lease of a car. In my experience, I have not been able to get that math to work out right. What are your thoughts on leasing a car?
Yeah, so I have never personally leased a car, but my dad has leased all of his cars.
Yeah,
It's just an approach that he likes. It's not good for everyone. But so let's take a step back real quick. What is leasing a car?
sure.
Leasing a car is basically going into a contract with a dealership to pay rent
Hmm.
to own the car for a 3 or 5 year period. And at the end of that period, you give the car back or
Hmm.
you buy it from the dealership. So the way that it works out nicely and the way that they can kind of get you to be more in favor of a lease is you generally have a lower monthly payment than maybe if you were to borrow the car or to get a loan for the car. So, for example, I know that Jeep loves to have advertisements about this. If you go out and buy a $30,000 Jeep, you're going to pay what, 400 or 500 bucks a month if on your car loan. But if you lease it, they'll like, oh, you can lease it for 3 grand down and 250 bucks a month. So
Right,
you're like, oh, it's a lower monthly payment than I should be able to.
right.
That should be better for me. And then, of course, at the end of the life, at the end of the term, you have the ability to buy the car. And generally, you can get a pretty good deal on that car, depending
Hmm.
on where it is in its life, how much you've driven it, that sort of thing. And so if you hate the lease, you can then buy the car because you want to get out of that program, or kind of restart it. But the nice thing too is the dealership generally pays for repairs and
Right.
upkeep of the car throughout the life of it. So you
Right.
don't have to worry about replacing the tires or paying for new belts or something like that, because you're getting a brand new car
Yeah.
and you're paying the amount to have the dealership upkeep it while you drive it around.
Right. And that's the appeal of it. I've done the math where it's like, because it is like, it's like 4 or 5 years generally, at least. I feel
Yeah,
like it's
3 to
like 4.
5, I think.
Yeah. Okay. It's usually works out to about $5,000, I want to say, in payment. It's right around there. It's like 5 to 10 grand, depending on the car, over the course of those years. And for me, it's like, well, I'd rather just own a used car at that price.
Right.
Also, as much as I love the idea of having someone else take care of the repairs, it's a brand new car. It's not gonna have that many repairs. Like you're
Right.
not safe. Like it's not gonna need a new tranny. All right, a new car's not gonna need a new transmission in the first 4 years. So you're not saving thousands of dollars in that regard.
Right. Right.
I mean, unless you just get a total lemon, and in which case it's worth it. But new cars are meant to last through a lease, right? They have every incentive to make a car do that.
Right.
So
I would
I
say the one time that it works
Mhm.
is if you're a business owner.
Right.
So specifically being a business owner, you can use that expense as a business expense.
Correct.
You can justify using the car for business purposes. You get a lease on it, then that's just a business expense that goes against your business income, as opposed to being a out of pocket personal expense.
Right.
And so then you can justify that on that front.
Mhm.
That might be one way to do it, as opposed to getting a loan and doing it that way.
Right. I think leases work in very particular circumstances.
Yes, exactly.
They don't work in my circumstances. I've looked into it. It's a lot of money for not owning a car.
Right.
But so I think we should wrap up with talking about the fact that this is all on paper. Cars
Hmm.
provide more than just paper value, though, right? They provide more than
Right.
just equity and money value. For me, I'm not a big car guy. I do enjoy I like driving a nice car, but it's not that important to me. So for me, a car is more of a tool. So the price really matters. But cars play a different role, don't necessarily play that role in society. So I know you love cars,
Yep.
and a car provides more than just equity to you. So does that make sense? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think this kind of goes back to a common theme we've hit at in a lot of our episodes is, if it works for you and your budget, then you can make it a good debt, essentially.
Right.
Yeah, I love cars. I'm not super knowledgeable on everything, but I love the way that cars look. Like for me, one of my big goals in life is to end up owning an Aston Martin one day. Like
Okay.
I've just loved that car since I was little. Like the Mustang is an easily attainable goal.
Hmm.
The stretch goal of like maybe when I'm 50 or 60 is owning an Aston
Yeah.
Martin, because I would have to have a ton of money to justify $100,000 car purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
that would
getting
be a
a
little bit
used one
tough.
would still be tough.
Yeah, yeah. But so
So
for me, like the value that I associate with cars has more to do with the way that the car looks, the drive, the type of car it is, as opposed to the actual utility of it, which is just
right.
getting from A to B.
Right.
So I go through cars a little bit faster. Uh, I've had 4, 5 cars in the last 7 years.
Oh wow.
Some of that is buying old cars and then them dying, or I got my Mustang for a short period of time, but then I ended up trading it in, actually selling it to get rid of the car loan when my daughter was born, and kind of
Mhm.
going through that process with my wife. So that, like, I'm gonna get a Mustang again because I love it, but that's
Right.
kind of where it's gonna be different. I might go through cars a little bit faster than even you
Oh
because
yeah.
they just have a different value to me.
Yeah. I've had 4 cars in the last 14 years. So it's not, and so it's just, I would say, as much as we kind of hated on cars a little bit in this episode, I think it is dependent on like what value does a car bring to you?
Right,
If it's, a statement piece, if you love cars, if you like working on a car, if it's your dream car, if you're a car person, if you like showing it off, if you like doing donuts, like all of that stuff can play into it besides just the value of the car. So there
right,
is, as much as I personally despise car loans, if someone's like, but I just love cars, it's my passion, I can't fault them for wanting a nice, expensive
right,
car. Like
right.
it's perfectly within your right. If that's your passion, if that's what you like, make it work for your budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else you think we need to talk about when it comes to cars and financing a car, getting a car, anything off the top of your head?
No, I think we covered just about all of it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, John.
To the people viewing, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe it. I keep saying this at the end of videos. Some people aren't likely to watch. I need to fix that. But if you're still here, that means you enjoyed this. So please like and subscribe it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.